I'm Thomas Banchoff. I teach mathematics at Brown University, where I've been for 40 years. I'm a geometer, fascinated by geometry, not just of 1 and 2 and 3 dimensions, but of 4 dimensions. At the end of the Flatland, the movie, that brings up a modern version of the challenge of higher dimensions, is that we see a hypercube, a 4-dimensional cube, coming down into the 3-dimensional space. What about a 4-dimensional cube coming into our 3rd-dimensional space? Well, Flatland, the book, really goes into some detail of talking about the process of analogy and what we would be able to expect to see if we saw a 4-dimensional cube. When we start with 1 point in 0 dimensions, we stretch that out to a segment with 2 points in 1 dimension, and then a square with 4 points in 2 dimensions, and then a cube with 8 points in 3 dimensions. So 1, 2, 4, 8. The sequence is compelling. When we go to 4 dimensions, we expect to take a 3-dimensional cube and move it in a direction that we don't have. But if we did, we would get 16 points. It would stretch perpendicular to our 3-dimensional space. It's really important in the visitation to the mysterious sector 33H to realize that the artifact, which has been left by a previous visitation from higher dimensions, is a cube that swirls around in 3-dimensional space, producing a set of slices in 2 dimensions, which at sometimes is a square and sometimes it's a hexagon. The notion that different shapes in the plane really come from slices of things in 3-dimensional space. This again is going to lead to the speculation on the part of A square and ultimately hex that there are spaces beyond the 3rd dimension, in which case we would be challenged to try to understand the slices of objects from 4 dimensions. We would have to understand this new space by taking a look at its slices. This is the Flatland analogy. The book shows a sphere or a ball that's sliced to produce first a point, and as it goes through the horizontal surface of Flatland, a circle that becomes larger and then smaller and down to a point. Well, the challenge is, for us, what would happen if we were visited by a sphere from a dimension higher than our own? In my classes, I say, we can arrange for that. Here's a visit of a sphere from the 4th dimension. We start with a point, an inestimable point, which grows in every direction that we can see to form a perfectly round little ball, approximation. And that grows as it sinks through our space and goes up to its full equatorial distension. Then it continues and shrinks back down to a point and disappears. But you could start a cube in a different way. You could start at an edge and see it grow up and come back down at an edge. And you can do the same thing in 4-dimensional space. You could start at a square, which would grow to a square prism and come back to a square. Most interesting is corner first, where you start at a corner of a cube. It grows to a triangle as it becomes cut off and then becomes truncated, so that halfway through, as a cube comes through Flatland, you would see a hexagon. And then, of course, it would come back off as triangles and coming out back off at a point. In 4-dimensional space, if a hypercube came through 3 space, edge first, you would see an edge, then a triangular prism. Further on, a hexagonal prism, coming back off as a triangular prism and coming back off finally as an edge. Most interesting in each case is corner first. For a hypercube coming through 3-dimensional space, you'd see a point that would grow in 4 different directions to form a tetrahedral pyramid. And as it grew, the corners get cut off. And you see 4 triangular corner shapes and 4 hexagonal shapes, a semi-regular polyhedron. As we go further, the triangles grow and the hexagons become triangles. We get 8 triangles forming a perfect octahedron. And those go back off an opposite way to get the semi-regular polyhedron, the tetrahedron, coming back off at a point. That slicing sequence is something that was very hard to imagine in the 19th century. I'm very glad that there is a new version of Flatland, Flatland the movie, and I hope it will serve its purpose to inspire a new generation of students, teachers, and the general public to go back and appreciate my favorite book, Flatland, and fulfill the wishes and the hopes of its author, Edwin Abbott, to contribute to the enlargement of imagination for all of humanity.